I found that eating a whole lot of pizza, pasta, pancakes, or grains, or even oatmeal, they just bloat you, and it becomes
Yeah.
really hard to digest and then to eat your next meal. So I use white rice to drive calories for high workloads, like 2-a-day CrossFitters
Hmm.
or football players, people who burn a ton of calories or have a lot of mass to support and need a
Yeah.
lot of calories just to maintain their body weight.
No, a lot of people worry about having, like, the orange juice and the cranberry juice and things like that, which you're often, you said the cranberry helps with the thyroid. Um, it, can you speak to why you added that in there and why you feel like that's beneficial for individuals, or is this just for a certain type of individual who happens to be high performing athlete or a bodybuilder that makes the most sense for?
Well, iodine is for everybody, particularly dieters. It wouldn't even be for athletes, although athletes do sweat out iodine at a much greater rate than the general population, so they have a higher demand for it. But the CDC put iodine into salt in the 1920s because we had goiter. It was a big problem, particularly up in the goiter belt, the northern section of the United States, where there wasn't a lot of iodine in the soils. And we saw that that had a huge effect on reducing the problems with hypothyroidism. So yeah, iodine is important in the diet. And if you want to use iodized salt, I think that that's a good recommendation. Foods that have a decent amount of iodine in them, although it's kind of hard to get enough, a Greek yogurt,
Hmm.
some egg yolks. But if you need additional iodine, because maybe you're an athlete that sweats it out a lot, or you just have a higher demand, then you can use, I recommended the cranberry juice.
Hmm.
I think that another option would be to use like a sea kelp, but I just didn't know that people would enjoy that. I try and
Probably not.
design it right. I try to design the diet so that it would be a lifestyle of things that people would commonly enjoy eating, and sea kelp's probably not on that list.
Yeah,
So I
way
put
down on my
cranberry
list,
juice in
dude.
there.
Yeah, it's way,
Right,
way down.
right. Just 3 ounces of cranberry juice is 300% of the daily RDA for iodine, which is about 125 micrograms. And that's for obviously for a sedentary middle-aged 140 or 150-pound person. So
Yeah.
the demands are higher as you get bigger. So that's the purpose of the cranberry juice, is for iodine specifically. I don't know that, I don't think the research suggests it cures any urinary tract infections, but certain portions of the population can help reduce the incidence as a preventative measure. And then the orange juice is really first of all, if you're dieting, I use oranges.
Hmm.
I like to put fruit in the diet. I mentioned it's high satiety. It does stimulate increased body temperature. It does stimulate the liver, which is where 80% of thyroid is converted from T4, the inactive form, to T3. So I do think there's a stimulatory effect there for metabolism in small doses. My
Yep.
recommendation is just a few ounces, even for weight gainers. For weight losers, I use the orange. I use fruit. And then any juicy fruit, oranges, berries, like you mentioned, blueberries,
Yep.
strawberries, raspberries, melons. But for my weight gainers, I let them have the orange juice because it stimulates appetite. And they need to eat a lot of food pretty often, and that's one of the biggest hurdles.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight, and you have to be in a calorie surplus to gain weight. It's one of the most challenging things for people that are trying to gain weight. And I'm talking about professional linemen in football too. I worked with Lane Johnson of the Philadelphia Eagles, and when I started working with him, he was 312 pounds. He struggled to stay in the 320s where he needed to be to perform optimally.
Yeah.
And so the purpose of some of the things in the diet are designed for weight gain. The orange juice is huge for helping with appetite. And then you mentioned the white rice, really easy to digest. Once you've built your foundation of potato and orange and and carrots and spinach and all that stuff, and you've got your micronutrients, now you want to drive calories. And I found that eating a whole lot of pizza, pasta, pancakes, or grains, or even oatmeal, in even spaghetti, in large quantities, they just bloat you, and it becomes
Yeah.
really hard to digest and then to eat your next meal. So I use white rice to drive calories for high workloads like 2-a-day CrossFitters or football players, people who burn a ton of calories or have a lot of mass to support and need a lot of calories just to maintain their body weight.
Yeah, I mean, I was having this morning, I had a pound of cooked white rice, which is several cups if you're measuring, and I'm measuring everything on this food scale. And I normally, if I'm eating, I'm waiting 2 hours to work out, but I wanted to get the workout in before I got on this podcast with you. So I had the white rice and had some protein powder and some blueberries. And a half an hour later, I was working out and I didn't feel as bloated or weighed down as I normally would have. Now, it was more of an upper body heavy day because I'm kind of still on that 2-day, 1 day off, 3-day split. But I felt much better. Now, leg day may have needed a little more time to digest, but I did feel pretty good where normally most people are having something like that if they have a quinoa or brown rice or something else, like a high fat meal. Yeah, I think that they might feel like they're going to hurl if they haven't had it that close to working out.
Yeah, and that's consistent with the recommendation from the ISSN, the International Society of Sports Nutrition. They recommend getting a good bolus of carbohydrates in the meal prior to training, and the time frame between that meal and your training, of course, depends on your individual ability to be comfortably digested and the intensity of the work, like you said, the difference between upper body and leg day.
Right.
But the biggest driver of performance pre-workout is not the sugar that you take in. Your glycogen stores will be adequate from a meal that you take in 2 or 3 hours prior to training. You don't need to down a whole ton of sugar before training. And to be honest, the science doesn't suggest it improves performance. The ISSN's looked at this extensively along with the NSCA. But the salt does make a big difference. And they do recommend, and they have a protocol, the ISSN recommends the 500 milligrams of sodium about 20 to 30 minutes before an exercise bout or a game or something like that, or practice. And that's about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. It's not a lot. I don't like the taste of the salt, so I use the salt tablets. I get sodium chloride.
Yeah, those the thermal tabs. I got those, and I'll touch on for everybody all the kind of supplement recommendations that Stan talks about. Yeah, the thermal tabs I popped, there's like 180 milligrams per tablet or something. So I would pop 2 of those 20 or 30 minutes before, and my strength, I mean, went up tremendously. I remember when I first messaged you, I just moved here. I hadn't had a ton of weights because I stopped training downtown, so I didn't have access to a gym, and for obvious 2020 reasons. So I ordered a bunch of weights and stuff, and I just told my wife a couple weeks ago, I'm like, I need to order more weights because I literally got stronger in that few weeks. And one of the constants, and I've done all sorts of diets, but one of the only thing that I could pinpoint that was different was having that sodium beforehand. And I just felt better. I felt more dense, and my pump, which makes a ton of sense, got much more pronounced from taking that pre and post, and actually during. And I have a drink that I have a little sodium in it too. But yeah, it was a big difference.
And your stamina and your endurance. You get 30, 40 minutes into a workout and you're not hitting the wall. You're still looking around for more shit to do. You just feel better. Yeah. So that's huge. And so that, and then if it's the kind of training, maybe you're a soccer player or something, or a football player, and it's going to be a 2-hour workout or something, or a game, the ISSN recommends that you can take 500 milligrams of sodium 90 minutes out, 500 milligrams 60 minutes out, 500 milligrams 30 minutes out. You don't want to take too much in a single bolus because you might miss your workout. You'll be on the toilet with diarrhea. It's not a more is better scenario. Yeah. And so you got to see how your body responds, because it will suck water into your stomach and expel the sodium. It'll be quite alarmed by that giant amount. So get used to it. Start, 500 milligrams is well tolerated. I gave Camille LeBlanc 1,000 milligrams at the CrossFit at the Reebok games, before and after some of the longer events, maybe not the short events, along with the Monster Mash, which was easy to consume. The ground beef and the white rice and a little bit of bone broth is real easy to eat. And like you said, you can digest it well, and it's nicely. She gained a pound of body weight over the 5 days of competing, 3 competitions a day, I think it was, which was new because she had always lost 4 or 5 pounds over the course of the competition, as most people would. And so maintaining body weights and hydration, you know, a lot of football teams will weigh you before and after practice and then get you to rehydrate to get that weight back. And that's always smart. So we try and prevent a lot of that going in and throughout so that you lose less weight and perform better. We also find that, like with Lane went from 312 pounds to 333 pounds. And his systolic blood pressure went down from the mid 150s down into the low 120s. And part of that was the CPAP, which dramatically changes your blood pressure and your salty sweat rate. Part of that was getting adequate potassium and vitamin D3, but also just him using sodium for training. He was sweating out less. He was a high salty sweater. It was as tested with a patch from the Heat Institute, Dr. Sander Godek's group. They see how much you sweat out, and your blood pressure and your level of conditioning can determine how much salt you sweat out and how dehydrated you get during training. So it's important to equip yourself.
Yeah, because, you know, that's the thing. You get all these standard recommendations to stay away from red meat and too much salt, especially for, you know, high blood pressure, and, you know, even the DASH dietary approaches to stop hypertension. And they're really saying to stay away from that. But a lot of research now isn't pointing to it's actually the sodium, but, you know, the type of food that you're having or the combination of the carbohydrates with it too. So I measured my blood pressure. I was 120 over, it was like 75 or something. And I measured it 5 weeks in, and it was pretty much exactly the same. And as I said earlier in the podcast, I was tripling my sodium levels. So it's quite interesting to see the change. And for me, not the change, because all my markers and everything were incredibly like on point.